trying to couch this in multiple ways. I was thinking that, if you ask a group of Jews why we don't believe in JC, it's because they never even consider it, and it's so nonsensical, and that's just the way it's always been. I think there's also another angle of it. You could talk about Christian Zionism, which I think is very interesting, a very kind of knotty subject, because I saw Netanyahu was interviewed once, not recently, it was a couple of years ago, on in an American television show, and they said, "What do you say about all these evangelicals that are supporting Israel so ardently?" And he said, "It's great, it's fantastic." He's like, "Do you know the reason why they support you is only because they believe when the Jews go back to Israel, JC's coming back, and then he's going to kill everyone that's not Christians." So what Netanyahu says, "Listen, let them support us, whatever." That's what they say. Whoever doesn't accept him, right? Let them support us now. When that eventuality surfaces, we'll deal with it then.
Netanyahu, he will deal with JC in his own way.
Yeah. What I say is like this. I say with regards to Christian Zionism, I think it's really nice. It's a nice breath of fresh air in 2,000 years of hostilities that the Christians have had to the Jews to have Christians supporting Israel. I think that's very nice and it's wonderful, and hope other countries and other religions follow as well. I think, wouldn't it be nice if there was Muslim Zionism, Muslims that support? There is some, I'm saying, but if it was as robust as it is in America, it'd be fantastic. That being said, I think that there is a grave danger of us, especially in Israel. In America, it's a little bit different, but I think there's a grave danger in Israel for there to be any laxity with regards to the severity with which we have to combat Messianism, because there is a lot of Christians operating in Israel with the sole intent of converting Jews to their faith.
Missionaries?
Oh yeah. And that's a big deal. And they specifically target, like in the North. The North is a hotbed of Messianism because most of the Jews there, or not most Jews, but there's a higher propensity of Jews that are not so educated and not so knowledgeable and not really equipped, immigrants or etc. People that are not equipped to deal, also the underprivileged, not equipped to deal with these kind of challenges. I know in the 60s, my grandfather was writing articles against Messian, counter-missionary articles, because that was a problem already then. So on one hand, we embrace the notion of non-Jews supporting Jews in Israel. Certainly it's a lot better than having violence directed at Jews, which is very common, especially historically. It's much better. And it's nice. It's nice to have support. It's nice that we don't have to be against the entire world all at once. It's nice to have a little bit of backing. And I think it does herald this kind of new age of Jews living back in Israel. And kind of, we see like the outlines of the plan. The Almighty is going to save the Jewish people. Like the idea of the Jewish Messiah, which hopefully we'll talk about a little bit today. But the idea of a Jewish Messiah, we kind of already see how it can really be borne out. If I told you 200 years ago that in 200 years there's going to be 6 million Jews living in Israel, you would think I'm absolutely insane, because there weren't even 600 Jews living in Israel. Maybe there was 600, but there was nothing going on, nothing substantial going on in the land of Israel. And you look at the way it is today, where you have let's say 100 years ago, a tremendous political movement to bring Jews back to Israel that didn't emerge out of religion. It came kind of out of nowhere, out of the most unexpected sources. Someone like Herzl, who was very distant from traditional Judaism, who didn't read Hebrew, didn't give his own kids a bris milah, right? Who doesn't circumcise their kids? Which Jew doesn't circumcise their kids? The Jew that's most distant from Judaism circumcises the kids, not Herzl. His own kid doesn't have a bar mitzvah. And this is the guy that's going to have this tremendous awakening and bring the Jews back to Zion, or at least begin the movement. It's very bizarre, kind of in historical context.
If you look on the history, even the Jewish religion or Judah tribe started on bizarre story.
Oh yeah, well I agree, and that's I like to say this might be controversial, but we know that redemption, specifically redemption, every time we've seen redemption in history, there's always some oblique way which it happens. Moses, right? We just read about Moses in this week's parasha, the Exodus. Where does Moses come from? First of all, who are his parents? Anybody knows?
Amram and Yocheved.
That's right. Amram and Yocheved. How were Amram and Yocheved related? Anyone knows?
They were both Jews.
No, they weren't both. They were husband and wife as well. Amram, that's true. Yocheved was Amram's aunt.
Ew, what?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's banned by Torah law. You know that?
But it was before...
It was before Torah was given.
Torah.
It's still a scandal, right? Post facto, right?
If you think about it.
Where did Moses
also,
grow up? Go ahead.
Jacob and Rachel, they're cousins.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, the cousins is not a problem. They're not against the Torah to marry cousins.
Or the uncle and the niece. It's the aunt.
So that's not a problem halachically. He married two sisters, which is interesting. But Judah and Tamar, right? Judah and Tamar, if you look at that relationship, that brings about Peretz and Zerach. That's the forebearers of Messiah, right? You go a little further down, you see Boaz and Ruth. Isn't that scandalous? Where the young girl kind of snuggles up to the guy in his bed, and they decide to get married, and she's a Moabite, and this is producing King David, this is producing redemption? Does that sound logical? Is that how you would tailor it out? I think of David and Bathsheba and that episode, and it's so scandalous. We can't even talk about it. We're so embarrassed. What's the deal? This is the leadership. This is royalty. This is redemption. That's the way it works. And we look at someone like, if I told you Theodore Herzl is going to kick off a movement that ultimately will bring about the creation of the state and the amassing of Jews in Israel, you would say, that's no way. It's not possible. And by the way, the rejection that there was two kinds of anti-Zionist, Jewish anti-Zionist responses. There was the religious anti-Zionist, and there was the reform anti-Zionist, or kind of the secular, non-religious, non-observant, if you will, anti-Zionism. The religious anti-Zionism was rooted in the fact, not because they didn't agree with Zionism. We talk about going back to Zion. It's in our prayer books. That's half of our prayers, going back to Israel. Rebuild the Jerusalem and sprout the redemption. That's what we pray for. And then we have it, we say no. The answer was because we couldn't imagine that someone like Herzl and someone like Max Nordau and someone like these people are going to be at the forefront of the movement to get us back to Israel. They couldn't imagine that that's so. That's the religious opposition to Zionism. The secular opposition to Zionism was because the reform movement was, in their charter, was anti-Zionist. And therefore they claimed that Zionism is anti-Jewish. It's anti-Semitic, they claimed. Right? It's against Judaism. Because their version of Judaism, which they amended since, to their credit, but their version of Judaism disavowed any opportunity to go back to Israel or to unite as a nation. And by the way, in Houston, right, there's two massive Reform synagogues. And the reason why they split in 1943 was over support over Israel.
Which one?
Beth Israel was, in their charter, was against Zionism, and Emmanuel split off because they supported Zionism. But I think that your point, I don't remember how we got off this to your point, but
repeat, I'm sorry, why the secular Jews were...
Oh yeah, not secular, I would call them Reform. But Reform Jews, because if you look at the 1885 document called the Pittsburgh Platform, which kind of organized what Reform philosophy was all about, it said in it, we are no longer a nation, and therefore we don't anticipate the return to Zion, nor the reinstitution of sacrifices or rebuilding the temple.
I think they also use the phrase
So they specifically...
Temples,
That's right, because it's a replacement. There's no such thing as... It means the whole Jewish dream of yearning, going back to Israel, reestablishing sovereignty over the land, the reconstituting, the religious laws and sacrificial laws and the ritualistic laws of yesteryear. That was banned. That was disavowed. That was repudiated by the reforms. And then you
Does
have...
that include when Messiah comes? Or?
Oh, they don't believe in Messiah.
They don't believe-
They
they don't
didn't
believe-
at that point. Right, they changed it.
They really still don't.
Today,
They live in a messianic era.
I don't know. Well, it's kind of hard to know what they believe because what the rabbis believe, what the constituents believe, is very different. The rabbis don't believe in Messiah, but the constituents, many of them would. Well, I don't know. I don't want. Let's amend that. I don't know if the official position is a belief in Messiah, but either way, that's not a highlight. You know what? I'll tell you the truth. We don't highlight that. I'm saying even in traditional Judaism, we don't highlight the Messiah. Chabad aside, but Maimonides tells us.
But they talking about different one.
Well. Maybe not, right? But the Rambam tells us that we don't talk about Messiah that much. We believe it's going to come. We anticipate its arrival. We yearn and await its arrival. But we don't really think so much about it. And by the way, part of the 13 principles of faith is not to do calculations as to when the Messiah is going to come. So if we say, this is the time of the Messiah, a lot of people say that this is the Ikvas of the Mashiach. Unless you're a prophet, which none of us are, you wouldn't know when's the Ikvas of the Mashiach.
So what about religious Zionism, which was largely messianist?
Well, it wasn't kind of pointing a finger and saying, this is the Messiah.
Guy,
this is, that...
They're saying this is the time.
Yeah, well, maybe, or this is the activity that we think will bring to the Messiah, because isn't that what the Jewish mission is at large, to try to bring to the Messiah? And the Messiah is, remember, more than just an individual, right? The Messiah is an idea. The Messiah is an era. It's a time period, right? The Talmud tells us, which, by the way, is the undisputed source of what we believe as Jews, Talmud tells us that there's a 2,000-year era of Messiah. We don't know anyone that's old. We're not talking about an individual per se. We're talking about an idea. And the idea of Messiah is the idea of all of the world knowing about God. If you look at our prayers from the high holidays, it's all about that. It's Bayomo Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. And that day the Almighty will be one, and His name will be one. There will be universal and ubiquitous acceptance of the idea of God.
There's still people that believe in polytheism.
Well, there still is, but look at the past 2,000 years. And it's you cannot possibly argue that the past 2,000 years have been dramatic in the penetration that monotheism has made to the world. We just talked about the Muslims, right? Our dear friends. And, of course, the Christians, of course. These are religions that, while being different from Judaism, and, of course, being plagiarized and being just bad imitations of Judaism, the core principle of those religions is the idea of monotheism. Now, that being said, Christianity is a variant of idolatry, because anytime you give God any sort of physical representation, anytime you take the infinite and you make it finite, that, by definition, is idolatry. So it's idolatrous, but it's a lot closer than what Dio Cassius, the great Roman historian, said, that the Romans had more than 30,000 gods, right? It's still less, right? 3 is a lot less, or 3, but 1 and 3, that kind of nonsense, the theological pretzel that they wrap themselves into is still a lot less than, or still vastly different than what it was in yesteryear. So we look at the past 2,000 years and we see how there's been tremendous inroads that at least the idea of monotheism has made into the world society. That being said, I'll just finish the point. That being said, there is still some pockets of polytheism or the kind of the stuff that's going on in the Near East. But there's a tremendously interesting statement that Maimonides, the aforementioned Maimonides, makes about this idea. And he says, this is kind of a hard thing to find.
In China, it's more like people that don't believe in God than...
Oh yeah, more.
China hasn't got a religion.
Right, but you know that there are 25 million Christians in China. There was a story about them recently. But that being said, now is a time where you could change the beliefs of a lot of people very, very fast. You know, just 30 years ago, there were communists in China. Now they're all capitalists. Right? So that can happen very fast. But there's an interesting Maimonides. It's very hard to find. I've heard it quoted before. I never could find it. I was always looking for it, and I finally found it. And the reason why it's hard to find is because in most editions of Maimonides, you actually don't have it. It's taken out. It's expunged. It's censored for obvious reasons. And I'll tell you what it says. He says like this. He says that the purpose behind Islam and Christianity is to help us, Jews, in our national mission of Tikkun Olam, fixing the world. Which, what does it mean to fix the world? Teach the world about God. To finish what Abraham began many years past. To bring about Mashiach, to bring about universal acceptance of God. Now we, on our own, we're having a hard time doing it, right? Or it's going to be like a tiered stages where the Muslims and the Christians will kind of make the idea known to everyone, and the Mashiach will come and kind of fix it, just slightly amend it. You know, the idea of one God now is understood or is accepted by almost everyone. Some people in China, of course, with notwithstanding. But the idea became universally, or at least if people do believe in God, or if there's the conversation that people could have of one God. Back in the day, to talk about one God was just bizarre. Like no one had that concept besides for us. And now, 2,000 years later, we see that the vast majority of the world believes in some version of this idea. And then Mashiach comes and needs to make a tweak, to tinker. The tweak is different than the change fundamentally. Sorry, I know you had something you wanted to say about that.
Oh no, I was pushing a fly out of the way and you thought I was raising my
apologize.
hand.
Yeah, we need the help, because how are we supposed to do it if we're told not to be missionaries?
And that's very interesting. I mean, this is an interesting point that you're bringing up, and I thought about this a lot recently.
Question. How are we supposed to bring the light of God to the world if we're not a proselytizing religion? Is that the question?
That's his question. It's a very good question. And I think the answer is like this. I think that the Almighty, remember, He gives us the mission, and therefore He only gives someone the mission if you could actually facilitate their fulfilling of that mission, right? I can't tell you to do things that you can't possibly do. Or maybe I can, but the Almighty certainly wouldn't, right? So we find a lot of interesting predictions that the Almighty makes in the Torah that indeed came true. For example, the idea of the Jewish people being scattered throughout the world. The Torah foretells that. And even if you question the legitimacy and the historicity and the authenticity and the veracity of the Torah, you still know that these predictions came true. Why? Because we look at history and we have verification to these ideas. And these predictions were made well beforehand. But that being said, why would the Almighty have us scattered? Is it possible that this is the way, even though we're not a proselytizing religion, but our influence is going to cover the entire world, because the Almighty will assure that we will have these touch points with every civilization?
That's so interesting. Another thing.
And maybe the Chinese don't know about God because we haven't really spent so much time in China.
I just have one thing to add, is that it's not necessarily mutually exclusive, because we're not looking to make anyone Jews. We want them to maybe follow the 7 Noahide
That's
laws,
true, but
which is a lot less, a lesser order, right?
Well, which is true. That's true. But part of it is obviously
Which
belief in God.
includes a God.
Absolutely.
Which includes acknowledgement of God.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I want to add another point, which is going to be controversial. I hope it's controversial, because it should be controversial. And that it's not that it means Tzvi's right that we have to be the ones to bring the world to God. Now, that could be done in a multitude of ways. It's obviously not done with proselytization. It's possible that it's done with the Almighty kind of forcing us into interactions with other societies, and they, like Rabbi Johnny said, we're going to be a light into the nations. We'll be a model. People will look at us for guidance, and then if we're the model nation, if we're the kind of the moral center of the universe, and people look to us, then we will affect them just by virtue of them having interaction with us. That's one point. But there's a very interesting piece of Talmud which sheds light on which on face value is very difficult to understand, and there's a lot of obvious questions to it. But it opens up a whole new areas of kind of insight. And the Talmud is in Sanhedrin, and most of the Talmuds you'll find about Messiah are in Sanhedrin. And it says that the son of David, which is always a reference to the Messiah, will only come either in a generation that's entirely righteous or a generation that's entirely wicked. Bedor shekulo chayav or bedor shekulo zakai.
Does that exist?
Huh?
Does that exist?
Okay, so what does that even mean? What does it mean a generation that's entirely righteous or a generation that's entirely wicked? But that's one question. But I'm saying, I think there's even a deeper question. I understand if the generation is entirely righteous, that makes sense. That's Mashiach. That's when that's a perfect generation. That makes sense. But what's the model of Mashiach coming when we're entirely wicked? So how we get there is that's a good question. There are those that have theorized that what that means is that we have to be very polarizing generation. We have to be kind of not a lot of people in the middle. We have the very, very, very righteous, very pious people on one end of the spectrum, and the very, very kind of wicked people on the other end of the spectrum, and not a lot of people in the middle. There has been that as a theory to try to
Of the two rather than not.
Yeah, it's actually one generation. It's not two generations. But the simple understanding is that there's two ways to Messiah. Way number one is via righteousness. So what does that mean? How do we define righteousness? Well, how would a Jew define righteousness?
Doing the right thing.
Torah, that's right. Torah and mitzvahs. So if we are righteous, we become the light to the nation. We teach the world about God. We influence them. And we bring Mashiach. Makes a lot of sense. We're wicked. How does that bring Mashiach?
There is no light to nations. They need they need the one guy who can have this crazy worldwide responsibility.
Yeah, but how does that work? Isn't this interesting? It's interesting, right? Is it interesting?
It's such a low level, like Bnei Yisrael in Mitzrayim, at such a low level, there's like almost nowhere else to go and nothing else to do. You really have to just be pulled out.
But we still got Moshe, so he'll be like Moshe. Even if we're at the 49th level of impurity, he'll be our Moshe.
Okay, so let me ask you a different question. Maybe. I think you might be right. We're speculating here. Go ahead.
Like Jonah, when he went to, I can't remember who he went to.
Nineveh?
Yeah, because they were all evil, and he had to tell them not to.
Okay, but then it's a generation that starts off as being entirely wicked, and then it becomes entirely righteous. So if then Mashiach comes, then we're entirely righteous.
Okay.
How is it possible that via the wickedness we bring the world to God? It's a very, like your
Actually,
question.
it does make a lot of sense.
Go ahead.
Because I'm looking during the history. If you see, for example, that wicked time that everybody's desperate and needs some hope. For example, it's a bad example, but some people took advantage on that. If you look on Germany after World War One, Hitler came to control because everybody was so desperate and looked for someone. He took it to a wrong place, but it was example of how one person
Saying
can
during
lead.
desperate times we find dramatic change.
Yeah.
I think that's very interesting. I know. I thought where I thought you were going was that during the lowest point in kind of the attitude the Jews have or the circumstances of the Jews, that's when you find the greatest messianic expectation. Like when all's lost, you say, "Oh, only Mashiach can help us," right?
Like in Phil Villeneuve, when he's like, if Messiah's going to come, surely he's going to come right now.
Right, can't get any worse, right? Well, I haven't
It's
watched
like a
it.
spring. Like the farther you push it down, the more it allows for change.
Okay, I think that's possible. I know historically, whenever there's been down times, whenever things are really bad, the messianic expectation goes up. When things are really good, where life's good, we don't have to think too much about Messiah, right? We look at what happened in the 16th and 17th and 1600s, 16th, 17th century with the false Messiah Shabtai Tzvi, where it was really a downtime, really a terrible time for the world. I'm saying beginnings of, I guess, what we would call today the Renaissance, but for the Jews it was really, really bad, and therefore someone comes who's really charismatic and really intelligent and really clever and really just wonderful, and like he says he's the Messiah, and people are just drawn to him because they're desperate. And the catastrophic disaster that resulted really still affects the Jews today. If you meet people today and you talk to them about Kabbalah, and they get coiled up, right? Which I know Rabbi Johnny and I have met a lot of those people. Maybe not so many with this Sephardic community, but in societies in circles that I've been around, you say Kabbalah and people recoil. Do you know why? That's leftovers of the trauma that Shabtai Tzvi brought upon the Jewish people. That's what it is. Someone like the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, one of the greatest Jewish writers, of course, but philosophers and ethicists that's ever lived. He was kicked out of Italy. It said they banished him because he was studying Kabbalah, and that was only 50 years after Shabtai Tzvi. Could you imagine? Imagine they banished Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the author of the Path of the Just. The Italian Jewish community said, "You are excommunicated from this place because you are doing Kabbalah, and we are scared people doing Kabbalah." That is because of the aftermath of Shabtai Tzvi. So.
Isn't there a thing where you're
Why
supposed to,
why Kabbalah these days are so popular?
Well,
among
Kabbalah's
non-Jews?
popular by where is it popular?
Everyone.
No, it's not popular everywhere.
Mostly in Hasidism.
Okay, so maybe
They're teaching even non-Jews Kabbalah.
yeah. So that I think is a tremendous defilement of all that's holy. I don't like it at all. I think what they're actually teaching is a very watered down version. They're not really teaching anything. And by the way, I'll tell you a secret. You know you know what we have in the Oral Torah? Okay, the Oral Torah is broken down into several parts. There's the Mishnah, which is the laws. There's the Talmud, the Gemara, which is the other aspects of the law that are, for example, how it links back to the written Torah, all the other examples, all the applications, all the exceptions of the law. Then there's the Halacha, right? That's part of the Oral Torah. Halacha, like what Maimonides wrote down, what the Rabbi Yosef Kai wrote down in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Jewish Law, which is essentially taking all of Talmud and pulling out from it practical law, which is essentially hidden within the Talmud. It was still oral. And then there's a last realm of oral Torah, which is called the hidden Torah. And it's still oral today. So anyone who says that they know because they learned some book, and Zohar 101, the idiot's guide to Kabbalah, anything like that, they don't actually know anything. They are puppeteers. They are, they are not puppeteers, or they're puppets, or they're parrots. They don't really know anything. The people that know don't teach it publicly. It's clear. People that teach it publicly don't know. That's the reality. And the people that walk around saying, "Oh, I have people coming to me," and the people aren't Shomer Shabbos. Like they're not Shomer Shabbos, and they're like, "Well, I'm the expert. I'll talk to you about Keter, Yesod, Malchut." So they have no idea what they're talking about. It doesn't affect them in any way. It's not real. This is not what Kabbalah is. This is not what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was studying in his cave for 12 years. This is not. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. And the Zohar was written in a way that its true understanding is hidden. It's really hidden. No one knows unless you were taught by someone who's a great Torah scholar who wouldn't teach it to you publicly. And listen, it's very sexy. It's very appealing. That's why people like it. That's why there's Kabbalah centers everywhere. But it's not real. It's why people wearing these red streams and all that. It's all for the red streams nonsense anyhow. But it's just people are looking for something scintillating, for something exciting, something that just captures them, and they find that in Kabbalah, but it's really, really useless.
Can you say that we can still be deeply inspired by Kabbalah, through the writings of people who did kind of take it down for us, like Rav Kook, for example?
Well, I think
Or even
Rav
the
Kook is
Ramchal,
fantastic. But Ramchal, my grandfather used to say, my grandfather was a great Torah scholar, he used to say that Ramchal's books are all Kabbalah. But it's written in a way that has multiple layers of understanding.
Yeah.
So you could read it and it's just practical advice. It's practical musar. But the way other people read it, if you knew Kabbalah, you would see that it's all Kabbalah. But we don't know Kabbalah, so we just learn it on face value. And that's great.
But it's not better maybe to learn the oral Torah before Kabbalah, the other...
Yes, that's what I'll say. That's what Mamadi says. Mamadi says, you want to study Kabbalah?
I was going to say, isn't that something you're supposed to do anyway? You're supposed to know.
Oh yeah, you have to know everything. So I'll say like this. I will give everyone here a license to study Kabbalah once you finish all 63 books of the Talmud. Finish it, and finish it twice, just for good measure.
Yeah.
And then you have a license to do it. Finish it once.
Yeah.
Twice. Study as much Kabbalah as you
Because
want.
People have this urge to get into the depths of...
But it's not depths.
On the women's
There's
side.
nothing more. There's nothing deeper for us than Havayas, Abaye, Rava, right? Just learning Gemara is deep enough, right?
Yeah.
There's plenty of work to be done.
Secrets, I meant.
Yeah, it's secrets. There's plenty of secrets that are locked into the pages of the Talmud. And
the
getting back,
neshama
go ahead.
will always want more.
Well, then you can access your neshama.
Neshama
Neshama is almost inaccessible for us. Neshama wants to die. You know that? This is the Talmud says. Talmud says the neshama wants to die every second. You think your neshama is happy to be stuck in your body? Do you think so?
No.
Of course not. You know why? Because the body is antithetical to your soul. They're opposites. It's suffering terribly. If you think you can feel your neshama when your neshama is feeling, you're wrong. Because your neshama is feeling absolute misery.
No, I mean,
Huh? Huh?
People that commit suicide, is that?
Well, no. People who commit suicide are usually depressed, or suffering in some other way. But it's not because their neshama is suffering. Because if you felt what your neshama would feel, we'd all commit suicide. Seriously, I'm not even joking. I'm serious. Thankfully, or maybe not thankfully, we don't feel what our neshama is feeling, and therefore its unquenchable thirst, for example, for Torah, is something we don't feel. If you go a day and a half without drinking water, you feel it. If you go a day and a half without studying Torah, you don't feel nothing. You feel great. Why? Do you know why? Because your feelings are not linked to your soul; they're linked to your body. If they were, you'd be miserable and depressed, and you want to jump off the roof because you want to get out of that pain. Number one. Number two, your only urges would be that of spiritual urges. And you would just study Torah because it's so fantastic. And you wouldn't even stop to eat. You'd probably die that way as well. Because you wouldn't tend to your body, you'd die.
But I mean, okay, but there are people who do mostly what they do is just study Torah. So I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying what you're saying is exclusive. I'm just saying I know what you're saying could inspire a lot more than you're letting it. Because you say okay, learn all 23 chapters of the Talmud first.
63.
Literally, yeah. I'm sorry.
63.
63. Yeah. I mean, for real, let's do it because yeah, our neshama has this thirst for Hashem so much that it wants to die just so it can be with Hashem. But
No, that's not why. It wants to die because it can't stand being with us.
Because it can't stand being with us. Because it can't stand being with us. But I mean, there are people who tap in more so than I guess the average college student. People like you who really you're in kollel all day, right? Like you're studying all day.
No, but
every,
go ahead.
Every neshama has
Yeah.
the same. It comes from the same source, and has that same yearn for closeness to its creator, to the Almighty.
Well, not all neshamas are created equal. That's true. But regardless, it applies. Just like everybody wants pleasure, physical pleasure and material pleasure, and acquisitions of wealth and all that. Some to a more degree than others, of course. But the souls are the same, right? They're the same. That's how they're wired. That's what they're driven to. But you said you make it more inspiring by what?
But I mean, like, because you're saying like,
Okay, but well, go ahead. Just let me improve my message. What's a better message? Go ahead.
that like, it's not crazy. It's not crazy to, I guess, like have this far off desire to one day merit to one day, like, you know, tap into the Zohar, but like for us to understand, like, and to be excited that it's a long journey to get there.
Fantastic.
And that
I
it's
agree.
Like, I mean,
I agree.
Like,
and it's
hearing
not.
that,
It's
yeah.
and your journey is not just to get to a destination. The
Yeah.
journey itself is the destination,
like,
right?
hearing
That is
now,
the goal.
It's like, yeah, it's daunting to get through 63 tractates twice.
Well, let's get through one or
But, like,
half a chapter.
But I mean, like,
That's
the
most
desire
that's delightful.
is there somewhere. Like, as a Jew, like your Jewish soul, like,
Oh,
that
yeah.
desire
Well,
is there.
I want to take a look at the last halacha in the fourth chapter of Maimonides, right? The very first section called the Foundations of the Torah, Yesodei Torah. The first four chapters are about theology, talking about God.
Right.
And he says at the end, he says, all this is called pardes, which means garden.
Yeah.
And he says,
Acronym.
well, this is really what the most important thing is, but what we do is we study all of everything else, Havai, Abai, Rav, which means the arguments of Abai and Rav, which are the two most common names in the Talmud. And then when we've done that, you go back to this. Now, even though he brings it at the beginning because it's the most important, it's paramount importance, but to really understand it, you have to do that first. Not to say that that's not exciting. I think that's very exciting. I think it's exceedingly exciting. I think it's just wonderful in every way, and very difficult, very challenging. There's a lot of room for insight and wisdom, you know, and challenging yourself there. That being said, that ought to precede your ventures into the pardes.
Certainly.
That's all I'm saying. So,
If we have this
on my message.
If we have this wonderful world before us, and that's like inherent to the desire of the Jewish soul, what do the Gentiles have? They have 7 laws and that's it.
Gentiles also. Listen, Gentiles have a soul, and Gentiles have a soul that suffers a lot, like our souls suffer. They don't have the same soul quite. The Gemara says that some Gentiles that convert, their souls were actually privy to Mount Sinai experience, because our souls were at Mount Sinai, and Gentile souls were not. But some Gentiles were, because they're the ones who are future converts. So, that being said, they still have requirements to live a good life and to be contributors to a healthy society. And the idea of Mashiach is for everyone. Like the idea of Mashiach, Jews don't need Mashiach. You know that? Jews don't need Mashiach. We want Mashiach now. We don't need Mashiach.
But we
Right?
can't do the service in the temple until.
Well, we hear
There's a
right. So
different-
that's true, but we had that even before Mashiach. Mashiach will build but the idea of Mashiach is for the whole world. It's for God, even in a weird way, that God's kingdom should be complete. But it's not for us. We have everything we need for spiritual ascension and greatness.
So I guess if we're saying like Islam and Christianity have a share in merit because they help spread the idea.
I don't want to talk about
monotheism.
merit. I don't know what their merit's going to
Okay,
be,
like-
but they have a role to
They
play.
have a role to play, but they're still just like poor imitations.
Yeah, they're knockoffs.
So I guess like what spirituality does a Gentile like have access
Well,
to?
what's interesting is that Hasidei Umas Om Yesh Lahem Lamba, right? The righteous of the Gentiles have a portion of the world to come. A Gentile could be righteous and have a portion of the world to come. You got to be a Noahide. It's very simple to have a portion of the world to come for a Gentile. Be a good Noahide. Be a good person, and you're good to go. Right? Do charity, do kindness. Don't steal, don't murder, don't rape. Believe in one God. You know, follow the law. And you're a good person, and you positively contributing to society, and you have a portion of the world to come if you're that person, and your soul also yearns for God, and you do give it some dosage of that. Listen, there is a ceiling, right? There's a ceiling because you can't have Torah, and Torah accelerates this soul's ascension. Well, more precisely, it accelerates the kind of the spiritual cleansing of the person, because the Torah really doesn't affect the soul. Torah is more for the body, which, as a sidebar, the Torah is about fixing the body. The soul starts off perfectly fine. We don't need it. The problem is the soul gets sullied by the body, but the Torah is primarily about the body, not about the soul. It's about fixing the body, because the body is the antithetical.
That's why the mitzvahs are physical.
That's right, exactly. But yes, there is a certain ceiling that Gentiles can reach because that they're maxed out at. I think having a portion will come is still a pretty good place to end up, regardless of your religion.
Yeah.
But there is a ceiling.
Yeah.
Then again, there's less responsibilities.
Yeah.
And less ways to lose out your portion of what to come.
Is the non-Jewish world aware that they don't have the same access?
Well, what's interesting is that
there is an avenue of conversion available to them, and they probably
the question is, who says they have to have an avenue of conversion? They could be good people and have a portion of what to come, and what's wrong with that?
Right.
And the question that I thought you were asking is, what happens if they don't know about the 7 Noahide laws? What
Right.
about then?
That too.
The Rambam actually interestingly tells us, says each one of the 7 Noahide laws, you don't need a teacher for it.
it should be self.
It's self-understood, right? Every society and even every individual should be able to arrive at the conclusion that 7 Noahide laws are moral and right and correct.
One of them believe in one God.
Yeah, that makes sense.
How are you supposed to come to that?
It makes a lot of
yourself?
sense.
People didn't for thousands
Yeah, but
of years.
if you
Well,
think about
people,
it,
so the fact that people didn't for thousands of years, but today most people believe that, and it's logical. It's logical. The fact that a lot of people believe in something that was illogical doesn't mean
Yeah.
that someone
It's
couldn't
actually-
have reached the logical conclusion on their own.
it's not just logical. If you know preacher, most of them reading the Bible, so they know about these rules.
Yeah, well, today-
I think you might be referring to
Like
the whole
Hindus.
But yeah,
East
Hindu
Asia,
and
right?
pagans.
Oh,
Or like the Greeks.
Yeah.
Well,
Zeus.
the fact that a
Bringing
lot of
it full
people
circle.
didn't get that is unfortunate, but it doesn't mean that it was any less logical then than it is today. It was the same logic, and some people did get to it. And by the way, a lot of Christians, it's a very, very popular thing today for Christians to abandon the whole JC nonsense and to come to Torah and to become real Noahites, because it doesn't make what they're being sold is a bag of goods. It doesn't make any sense.
Right,
Especially when they
with
find
this
out
whole
that
group of
Sunday's
them.
not the
That's
holy
right.
day.
I know that. I'm there all the time.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Right. So I know someone comes to my class in TVT on Sunday.
Yeah, there's some things in Christianity as well that just once you realise it, I don't know why anyone
It's
would say,
nonsensical.
like Santa Claus, you're taught until like the age of 10 that he exists, and then suddenly he doesn't. What's that going to say for the rest of the religions?
Yeah. Listen.
So like if Noahidism had like really taken off 1500 years ago, like do you think how high is their ceiling? Like, could there be a Noahide rom-com?
No, for sure not, because that's Torah. They can't have Torah. They cannot have Torah. I think they could be fantastic people, someone like Mother Teresa, or someone like Albert Schweitzer, or someone who built hospitals, someone like Bill Gates, right?
Yeah.
For that matter. Bill Gates is a righteous Noahide. I don't know what he believes about religion. He probably doesn't talk about it because he's like a politician. He can't say either way, right? Well, I guess politicians can, but he can't. Business people don't take sides in politics or religion. But he's someone who's doing so much to fix the world, to send millions of vaccines and to battle malaria and all those wonderful things. I think is just tremendous. And that's an example of a Gentile who's reaching really wonderful heights. The Gemara brings a bunch of stories in Avodah Zarah. The Gemara brings stories about Gentiles that earned their portion of the world to come in one instant. Like the guy who jumped into the fire, he was the executioner. His job was to kill rabbis, and he had a change of heart, and he did one good act, and he died in the act that he did, and he got a portion of the world to come. And for us, that's depressing to find someone who gets a portion of what they come in 1 second, while we have to toil every day of our lives to get there.
Who was that?
Well, there's 3 Gemaras in Avodah Zarah. One of them in Avodah Zarah 10b, one in 17a, and one in 18a. And 3 episodes where they tell of individuals who were sinners, One of them was a connoisseur of prostitutes, the Gemara says. He would visit every single one there was. And then he found one who was so super expensive, but so distant away, and he went there, and and he kind of got inspired, because she kind of gave him she castigated him, and he got inspired, and he repented, and he died. He was so racked with guilt that he died. And there was a booming prophecy that says, this guy is welcome to the world to come. Story number one. Huh?
Because he felt guilty.
No, because he repented, and and therefore he did an act that really was an achievement for his soul.
I think I saw in Maimonides recently that a person can accomplish teshuvah, repentance, even till the last moment of their life.
That's right.
Regret, confession, forsaking the sin.
Right. So, well, these particular stories are people that all three instances. It's a very interesting. I have a whole class on it, but a very interesting insight where three people that were all sinners that dramatically changed their way of life, kind of on a dime, and all three of them died because of that, and all three of them had this booming prophecy that it's possible to acquire your world in one instant, in one hour. But this is an example. The way I explain it is an example of someone kind of giving up their lives for God, and therefore, kind of by their martyrdom, achieving kind of a totality of perfection that's needed to become a portion world to have a portion world to come.
Rabbi, I have a different
Go ahead.
question.
We still haven't gotten back to how
Yeah, it's a
Mashiach can
different
come.
question.
Go ahead. That's fine. We'll get back there. I assure you.
When you talked about the state of Israel, and it's established on non-religious people.
Yes.
My question is, we've been told in Israel that the reason why Beit HaMikdash is not rebuilt these days, and not just because the mosque is over there, is also because the reason that one of the rabbi of the Western Wall, said that the Jewish nation is not ready yet. Now the question is if non-Jews will be able to build that Beit HaMikdash. And I
don't know a lot of
non-religious Jews.
That's a good question. So first of all, I want to just amend your question because there isn't a mosque on the temple site. It's actually a shrine. Dome of the Rock is not a mosque. The Al-Aqsa Mosque. Al-Aqsa Mosque is off to the south, right?
Oh,
it's
you're
all the
right.
south.
That's actually part of the
Could that
story.
like stay there?
Right. Huh?
Could that stay there?
Oh, we're going to clear it out for sure. Not a question. Not a question.
Don't worry.
Absolutely not a question. But can non-religious Jews build the temple?
We don't
Well,
know the specifications.
well, we do know the exact dimensions. We actually have in the book of Ezekiel exact dimensions.
Yeah.
We know the exact size that the temple
Like an
needs to
inch.
be. But what we don't know is who is going to be in charge of building. Well, it's a mitzvah for everyone to build it, so I don't know why you would disinclude people that are not religious.
No, because
But the question is, who is the guy that's going to say, I'm going to be the one to do it? The guy that has that gumption maybe is the right guy. I'm not that guy. I'm not going to walk up there with a shovel and start digging. I don't know.
I believe
I
you.
don't
You
think
gotta
Huh?
get shot.
I don't think-
Probably. So it's maybe that's not such a good idea. Go ahead.
I don't think God compares religious people to non-religious people because what does that mean? Like,
Yeah,
there's
exactly. There's no switch. Exactly.
boundaries.
No, it's just
In God's
fascinating
eyes,
that
you're
the
all Jews
rabbi
anyway.
of the Western Wall say that the Jewish nation is not ready yet.
Well,
to
obviously
build
we
a
don't
temple.
have it. So if we're not, there's even debates. Are we going to build it? Is it going to be built with some sort of divine intervention?
And a lot of us are still really catty. Like we're just,
But it's hard for us to imagine how a shrine that's been in existence since 691. We're talking about a shrine that's 1500 and 25 years old, right? It's a long time. It's been around.
Yeah.
For us to just overnight pluck it and remove it, even though if you notice, all Islamic buildings have a crescent facing Mecca on top of it. If you actually look, the Dome of Rock actually has a circle on top of it, not a crescent. So the reason why is when they want to build a temple, they're going to take like a crane and they're going to hook it in there and lift it up like that and just take it off like that. That's the real reason. But it's hard for us to imagine how that's going to happen.
The question is that their whole thing is that the foundation stone is in there, correct? Or so they
Yes.
So
So
how would that fit in a context of the Beit HaMikdash? Because Judaism also believes that there was a foundation stone.
yeah. So the Mishnah says in Yuma that during the Second Temple there was no ark, right? During the Second Temple there were less vessels than the First Temple. Solomon built the temple with all the trappings, with all the bells and whistles, and the Second Temple, built by Ezra, that didn't have some of the vessels. It had some, yes, some it had, some it didn't have. But on Yom Kippur, in the High Holies, where the Torah was done on the Aron, on the ark, that wasn't there. So instead there was a rock called the Even Shasiya, which was 3 tfachim off the floor, so about 10 inches off the floor, that on which he did the Ketores. Now the problem, and there are commentaries, most notably the Tiferes Yisrael, who says, I believe it's Tiferes Yisrael, who says that the dome of the rock that's under the rock that's under the dome of the rock, under the shrine, is that same rock. If you actually look at pictures online, you're not allowed to go there as Jews, but if you look at pictures online, you'll see that it's actually very, very tall. It's not 3 inches tall. The answer, the reason why, it actually is the same rock, I think. Same rock. The reason why it's so much lower is because in the year 135, so about 65 years after the temple was destroyed, right? In the year 135, there was a rebellion in 132 when Bar Kokhba organized the rebellion and they kicked the Romans out of Israel, and they had 3 years of sovereignty over the land, and it was fantastic. It was wonderful. They minted coins. The coins that we have today in Israel are replicas of the coins they found from Bar Kokhba's time. Over the course of the 3 years after the rebellion was over, the Romans came back and systematically kind of destroyed cities and slaughtered thousands and thousands. But one of the things that they did as a result of this stamping out of the rebellion, they started killing rabbis, and that story where the guy who jumped in the fire, that happened then. Rabbi Akiva, they tortured him by flaying his skin. But one of the things that they did was they took Temple Mount and they raised it with a Z, which means they lowered it. They actually took, with forced labor, they actually lowered the mountain, because that was the center of kind of Jewish yearning, and a way to kind of stamp out the feelings that we have towards, kind of to oppress us. He forced slaves to go there and actually lower the mountain, just raise the mountain. And that's why that rock is now further exposed. They renamed Jerusalem, right? Jerusalem was used to call Jerusalem, and they renamed it Aelia Capitolina, if you hear that name. They renamed Israel. Israel was renamed to Palestinia. Shechem,
Nablus.
they made Nablus. Well, they didn't call it Nablus, they called it Neopolis, which means new city. But the Arabs can't say the P sound, right? If you ask an Arab to ask, they don't say pelephone, they say belephone, right? They, instead of Nablus, like Neopolis, they became Nablus. That's why Shechem is now called Nablus. But that's the same rock. The rock is most likely the same rock that is described in the Mishnah in Yom.
Where is it in the context of the temple? Like, should the temple? You're saying the Dome of the Rock stands where the temple should be or was, right? But if
No. That's part of the temple. That's
part of the temple included the
Kodesh
stone
Kodashim.
in
That's
it?
right.
So
Oh
what
yeah, in the
Kodesh
Kodesh Kodashim there was a stone. That's right.
Was it in the first?
Oh, I thought it was just the Ark.
Yeah,
of
it was
Kodesh.
there, but they had they had a Aron on top of that as well.
Oh, the Ark
in-
of Kodesh, the Holy Ark was on top of the stone.
I assume it was on top. It was there. It was near it. I don't know exactly where it was.
Oh.
But the Mishnah says that in the Second Temple they didn't have the Ark. Instead, they used the stone instead.
Okay.
So that was right there. So that's if you know the way the temple's structure. I'm making a little image here, right? So if we have the western wall, right? So this is from the west. This is the south. There's the Al-Aqsa Mosque, right? This is the east, which is Har Hazesim, right? Mount of Olives. So the way it was situated is the temple was like this. So here would be the innermost parts of the temple. This would be the entrance to the temple. So much so that you could actually see from the mountain all the way into the temple. But this was the entrance. This was so this is the plateau on which the temple stood. This is Temple Mount, right? And this is the Kotel. This is the Kotel. Here's Aish, right? Here's the Shawarma store we used to visit, right? But this is the kind of the back side. So right over here would be where they built the shrine. Is right on top of the stone, which is at the innermost part of the temple, and where the Holy of Holies was.
Isn't that where the Arcadum is on that stone?
That's right.
Yeah, actually, these days you have the caves that you can go underneath and you can see the wall. That this is the closest wall to the.
Wow.
Hotel tunnel tours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So back to the question at hand. I didn't forget. I thought I would, but I didn't. How is it possible that the Mashiach comes in a generation that's entirely wicked? If it's righteous, we do our part, we're good, we follow the Torah, we do the mitzvahs, we're the Orla Goyim, we are a nation of kings, a kingdom of princes, and a holy nation. We have this parsha. Vatem tihiyuli mamlachas kadosh. You will be to me. What's the model of the nation? Am segula, or right? That's great. Bring the Mashiach, fantastic. What about if we're entirely wicked? What then? So here's my theory. Okay, it's gonna be controversial. Well, I don't know if it's just controversial. If you look in Deuteronomy, I have the exact. I don't have it written down anywhere exactly. I think it's in 429, maybe. I have it written down here. And the verse is talking about what happens when the Jews do not follow the Torah and they abandon the mission and they run away from Judaism and they say we want to be like everyone else. What happens then?
Is it not every time we're putting tefillin and we say we're going to stop the sky from raining?
Well, yes. Yeah, it's bad. Okay, it's bad. I don't have the exact quote here. We had it ahead. Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 21 to 27. So the Torah says what happens when the Jews misbehave. They get punished. And they get punished really badly. And we look at history when the Jews are, following the Torah. There's peace and cohesion amongst them. There's unity. We don't have problems from without. When the Jews start fighting from within, they start abandoning their mission and start rejecting the principles of Torah. That's when we have enemies from without coming in and destroying us. You look at what happened when King David and King Solomon, fantastic 80 years of peace, prosperity, stability, and Torah greatness. Afterwards, you have the split, and then you have idolatry, and then you have the Assyrians come and slaughter everyone, and then a little bit later, the Babylonians come and they get rid of everyone. And that's really what history is. Whenever there's a down point of our spiritual behavior, there's going to be anti-Semitism. That is the Jewish view of anti-Semitism. And the reason why is like this. If you look at that verse, I have it. It's at chapter 29, verse 21 in Deuteronomy. What describes what happens when the Jews get punished. It says like this: the Jews will be punished, will be terrible, will be torn from the land. All the terrible things will happen to them. And then it says like this: and the nations of the world will ask, why is the Almighty so angry at His people? Right? And they'll answer, it's because they abandoned God and they abandoned Torah, and they went and served other gods, and that's why the Almighty punished them. So what this is essentially telling us is what happens to the Gentiles, to the world at large, when the Jews abandon Judaism, when the Jews adopt the path of entirely wickedness. What happens to them?
They come to realization.
The Gentiles learn about God not because of us, but because of our downfall, because of our wickedness. Either way, either path brings the same destination, brings Mashiach. The world knows about God. However, one of them will be because of the Jewish people, because we're the model of the nations, we're the kingdom of priests, we're the holy nation, we're the light to the nations. Fantastic. Or they'll learn about God because they see us being punished. And that too will bring them to God.
If we're like the completely
wicked,
I mean, like, will there still be a lot of people who have sharing the world to come?
Well, all of Israel has a portion of world to come, correct? It's very hard. It's not very hard, but it's somewhat hard for a Jew to lose the portion of the world to come.
The three things.
Well, Rambam brings you a whole list of ways you can lose your portion of world to come.
Is there only 3 people in the Talmud says that have lost it?
No, the Talmud gives categories of people, and then it gives individuals. It gives 7 people,
7.
4 kings and 3 lay persons.
Jesus one.
No, Jesus is not one of them. Bilam is one of them. some revisionist Christians have said that every time the Talmud talks about Bilam, it really referring to JC.
What's
Is
that
that
vision
like
as
to-
Christian?
Huh?
Play it safe.
No, that's because this is a whole other topic, but that's because the cynical view, which frequently was adopted, especially by the censors of the Talmud and of Jewish writings and literature, was always that the Jews are trying to always kind of castigate and make fun of JC. Problem is you can't do that because if you write it overtly, then the Christians will come and pummel you. So they made hints at it, so to speak.
Yeah, so we play it safe. So.
Right. So play it safe. That's right. So one of the theories was that every time it said Bilam, it talks about Bilam, like the biblical Bilam
With a donkey.
with a donkey. That's right. That's actually referring. So not in the Torah, of course, that preceded them, but in the Talmud, when it talks about it, it's referring to JC. It's actually not such a bad theory. It's actually very clever because the Talmud does say that Bilam has no portion of wealth to come. But the Mishnah doesn't seem to make a lot of sense because the Mishnah starts off, Kol Yisrael Yeshlam Tekel, about all of Israel's portion will to come, all the Jewish people portion will to come. And these are the people who lose the portion will to come. It gives a list of people and then a list of individuals. All those individuals, Korach, the Gemara is a whole shah, Korach Hadassah. I don't remember what the Gemara concludes. I think there's a whole machlokas, I don't remember. But either way,
Yeah, down below.
When they're
That's the only
kids,
way
right.
So his children could have wouldn't have like the bad yachus because he saw the vision.
yeah, I don't remember. There's a whole Gemara about that. And it tells a story about the guy who said, I know where it is. And they went there.
Where the ground swallowed him up.
Yeah, and they were hearing them saying what they did. Oh, their face was so black because they were carrying this and they got burned so bad. But they were still alive and they were screaming, Moshe is true and his Torah is true and we're a bunch of clowns. And they're just screaming like that. And it was so hot from the little cleft in the ground where it was still open that they took a ball of wool and doused it in water and put it over there and instantly got incinerated. That's what the Gemara. There's a whole Gemara about that.
What's a revisionist Christian?
Oh, so the revisionist Christian is the guy who's going to say who says that the Talmud talks about JC when it really talks about Bilam, but they revise it to say that when it says Bilam, it really means that it's a reference to JC. I'd say there is some plausibility to that theory because the Mishnah does start off by saying all of Israel's a portion will become, all of Jews, and it says, well, these are the ones who lose it, and then it brings Bilam, who wasn't a Jew to begin with. So why would the Mishnah feel a need to tell us that Bilam loses his portion will to come when we never would have assumed that he had one to begin with?
Yeah. Were the other 6 Jewish?
Well, yes, the rest of them were Jewish. The rest of them were either kings of Israel or people like Menashe, one of them. The Gemara has a shy one opinion, and the Gemara argues that he does have a portion will to come. Menashe, Achitofel, Gehazi,
No, different Menashe, the king in the...
yes.
Oh,
Yeravam ben Nevat, Menashe, Achav. These are the names of the people. Either way, I think that this is a tremendous insight for us. Number one, to understand why anti-Semitism actually, what's the purpose of anti-Semitism? Because there's no really explanation using kind of non-traditional or non-supernatural causes for anti-Semitism. Because any reason you give, there's a corollary where the cause was not an effect and the result was an effect. So the reason why the Jewish tradition of why we have anti-Semitism is a method of pushing the Jews from the path of a generation of entirely righteous wickedness to a path of righteousness. Go ahead.
I have a couple questions. I agree to that. What about though people that will say, "What do you mean? There was plenty of other nationalities or ethnicities that have been killed out, genocide towards them, whatever."
Yes, but remember that's the fact that people hate other people. That's not a phenomenon that's so unique. We have this in America today. There's all this discussion. Is there xenophobia now in America with the whole discussion about immigration? I'm not taking a side on the issue. I'm saying there's a discussion about that. But that's not unique. That's not the unique phenomenon that anti-Semitism is. Anti-Semitism is so unique because it transcends different eras in history, and it transcends different statuses of people. Right? People who could be illiterate and poor, and they're hated. And then people that are highly literate, highly educated, highly successful, and they're hated.
Right.
And then you have Jews in every part of the world.
Discrimination.
Exactly. It's the only thing they agree is that everyone hates the Jews, right? There was that line that these hate that people and those people hate those people, and everyone hates the Jew. I don't know who said that. Someone said that. So that's the universality of anti-Semitism, and the degree with which irrationality plays a part in explaining why you hate Jews is unique.
So that's a huge question then. How is there meant to be a means of the Jewish people bringing the light of God to the world if Esav son of Jacob,
Well,
if there's
look-
a condition of
So
hatred
so
for
let's
Jews?
so let's look at history. So if you asked me the question 2,000 years ago, I would not have the answer for you. But now I do. You know why? Because we have 2,000 years of the Jews influencing the non-Jews, despite the fact that the non-Jews hated the Jews.
So you're
You
saying
know
they're
how?
not- they're not mutually
Well,
exclusive.
you know what
So
did
we're
we
training-
teach the world?
We're spreading the light of God to the world while they kill us.
Oh yeah, so both like we said. Now we hope to not bring Mashiach because of our wickedness. That's not what we want. And our anti-Semitism kind of pushes us, nudges us away from a path of rejecting God. That being said, if you look at what we have believed in the past and what the world today believes, we find dramatic inroads in our ideas. Number one, the idea of one God, that became very popular amongst the non-Jews. But the ideas of the universal morality, for example, or all men are created equal, the idea that you shouldn't be a product of your class system or your caste system that shouldn't govern who you are. A mamzer could be ahead of a mamzer Talmid Chacham could be ahead of a kohen gadol that's an am arts. That is an idea that only we had. The idea of someone being able to chart their own path in life. That's a Jewish idea, and that has made inroads. We talk about the idea of law. Our law greatly influences the law of those around us. The fact that every person is precious and every life is precious, and how murder is so terrible, that became popular in the world today, that everyone kind of agrees. We were saying it 2,000 years ago, and we were the only ones. So I'm saying we are influencing the world, and even
Isn't
though
that ironic?
it is ironic, yeah.
You haven't given an answer. You've just given a reality that
I'm just saying, yes,
proves that it's happening.
yes. So
No,
it's
I agree.
happening.
The reality
Exactly
is that with all the anti-Semitism, we still have had a positive effect on the world.
positive, dramatic,
Dramatic,
transformative
yeah.
effect.
That's very.
So that's that, guys. We didn't get to talk about why Jews don't believe in JC, but we did get to talk about Messiah and how that works and what our role is and kind of
Would you believe in JC?
who. Wow. Who does?
Yeah. Who
I'm
does
just
believe?
no. I agree. There are a lot of people that don't believe in JC, but still would like to know why we don't believe in it.
No, I'll
Kind of
tell
an
you, like-
organized and systemized approach to answer that question is kind of interesting for a lot of people.
When I did-
We didn't get to talk about it. We got talked about other interesting, important things, and I'm okay with that. We'll do that next time, I guess.
Alright, cool.
We have something for next time. Okay, guys. Lots of fun.